Welcome to Catch and Go. In today's telecast, we're going to do part 2 of the title called Why BRICS Nations Will Collapse. Let's go straight into PowerPoint number 1. The Abraham Accord. Below that, the difference maker. Below it, Donald J. Trump. And then game changer. PowerPoint number 2, the global collapse. Below that, the word accelerate. PowerPoint number 3, there is no diplomacy in the 21st century. But at 9:30 a.m. today, as I was preparing part 2, the grace of God delivered the word, and the word of the Lord came to me. And at 9:30 a.m., the Lord said, code of conduct. And I knew that the grace of God was speaking concerning China, but practically speaking concerning the South China Sea. For PowerPoint number 4, God's warning. And then below God's warning, I want you to understand that God is saying that we're closer than ever to Revelation chapter 6 in the writer. For PowerPoint number 5, the Arctic, the Indo-Pacific, the South China Sea. And what you need to understand, that the grace of God is saying that you're going to see global war, not only in the Arctic, in the Indo, and especially in the South China Sea when it comes to the Taiwan Strait. For PowerPoint number 6, it's a delay game. Below it, you write Russia in China. PowerPoint number 7, deep seek, and then below that, write concern. PowerPoint number 8, you write the Asian leaders and the ASEAN leaders. And next to that, write the word compromising. For PowerPoint number 10, the Arctic. And next to that, Iceland. For PowerPoint number 10, the global south. Let us get started with PowerPoint number 1. And I said PowerPoint number 1 was the Abraham Accord. The difference maker is Donald J. Trump. And here's the reason why, and I'm going to deliver and give you the Trump card. The reason why is that Donald Trump is super highly favored when it comes not only to the Muslim nations, the Arab nations, but also when it comes globally around the Middle East. And not only he is highly favored, but he is also favored in many parts of the world. And I know there are many nations that do oppose Donald Trump, but technically, when you look at this whole thing, Donald Trump is highly favored, and that's a game changer when it comes to the battle between the West and between the BRICS. And the BRICS nation are in for a rude awakening, but God is about to wake up not only all the nations, including people around the world in civilization and all of humanity, that the grace of God has shown me one word, and he's been saying this for quite some time. The Lord said the word departure. And what I want to do is talk a little bit about this game changer, because if you look at the way Donald Trump is received, not only in the Middle East, especially when it comes to the nation of Israel, when it comes also in many ways when it comes to inside America, in the U.S., Donald Trump is highly favored. And I have said that he is God's middleman and God's setup man to bring about the Trump revolution and a time of global revolutionizing. And I have said the 11th hour and the establishment of the revived Roman Empire and a new world order being established. For PowerPoint number 2, the global collapse accelerating. And the reason I said that Donald J. Trump is a difference maker and a game changer is because he has decided and made up his choice and his decision that he's about to put tariff not only on those BRICS nations, but on nations that come on board with the BRICS nation. Any nations that come on board with those BRICS leaders. And I have news for you that you need to understand that when it comes to NATO, when it comes to the West, when it comes to Western allies, when it comes to Europe and the European Union and the state, not only the Baltic states and the things that are happening in the Black Sea, They will have the upper hand because, as I have been saying, that the nations that come under the Antichrist alignment more than likely and practically are those in the West, those over in Europe, in the European Union, and those that are affiliated or connected, amen, to the ones in the West. And also in the things that are taking and shaping up in the Black Sea, and you're beginning to see that it's a game of chess. And I said it's a game of chess, and it's a delay game between the Russians and Beijing, and they're just playing a bluff game in a moment where they're trying to bluff Trump, and they're basically tapping the president. The president needs to flex not only might in power, remind every country and globally every nation around the world that the U.S. still is considered not only the #1 superpower nation, but I said over and over that the U.S. not only dominates in the 21st century, especially when it comes to biometric chips. Now, for PowerPoint number 2, the global collapse accelerates. You know that there is a trade war, but I have said over and over that the greatest prophecy in the 21st century, that the one that the Lord gave me back and spoke in 2010, when I was in Singapore in a place called Pongo, the grace of God brought divine revelation, and God spoke about global event and global sequence and cosmic and catastrophic event that will happen, and that there was going to be an acceleration, and that's what he spoke in 2020. 10 years earlier brought divine order, divine intervention, because the number 10 is the number of divine order, the number of divine intervention. 10 years later, in 2020, the Lord said acceleration and a global sequence and global event and catastrophic event. And you see here that what's going to cause the global trade war escalation is those tariffs that President Trump is going to put on those BRICS nations, but those BRICS leaders. And the BRICS leaders, let me say this, there is a war inside the BRICS. Not only among the BRICS leaders. You can see there's a war between Beijing and India. Our war over the Himalayas, even though that is ceased for a second, but that's just a temporary cease. And you see also that there is a war between India and Pakistan over not only the Himalayas and over Kashmir. And there are other nations. There is a collision when it comes to nation colliding with one another. You're going to see that if he's still around, President Xi will make a miscalculated mistake, and he's already made major mistakes, a major blunder, and miscalculated step. And I said back in 2022 or 2023 or 2024 or 2021, I said there are two leaders that don't understand that there is a God who is still not only has full control, not only he still reigns. And I said that these two leaders have no clue or don't even take time to read the word of God, but when it comes to prophecy and when it comes to God, period. And God is about to raise the stakes. And I said that God is not only about to raise the stakes when it comes to this final mobilization, and the Lord mobilizing world leaders and world nations and world power and world government to basically to prepare their souls and prepare their nations to go into battle, because what's shaping up is World War III and the Battle of Armageddon and the Ezekiel 38 war. Now, for PowerPoint number 3, there is no diplomacy in the 21st century. And I have made this very clear, that it's time that America needs to flex its military power. Because look, the Russians, not only the Russians, but Beijing, with the nations that are part of their alliance, they're just basically playing this bluff game. And you're looking at North Korea, you look at Iran, and you look at Venezuela, and you look at these nations, and you look at Brazil, which is part of the BRICS, and you look at the BRICS nation and the BRICS leaders. They think that they will be able to muster the blow, and they will be able to not only counterattack the U.S. when it comes to tariff. But I got news for you. That just because they have 40% of the world's populations when it comes to the financial markets and trade and oil and so on. I want you to keep this in mind and remember what I'm going to say. That's not going to help the BRICS at all, because I said that America, not only with Donald J. Trump and with the Western allies, those nations over in Europe and the European Union, with the UN, with the World Health Organization, and with the World Economic Forum, they, with the IMF, they are the ones that come under that Antichrist alignment. And there's going to be a point and a time that you're going to see a global war, a global battle between the North and the South, and the global South, and the kings of the North and the kings of the South. But what I want to say to you is this, that there is no diplomacy in the 21st century. All you need to do is that you need to prepare your nation for a global war, World War III, for your nations to be ready, prepped up, and ready to go to war. And God is sending warnings, because this is what he just said to me, Southeast Asia. And God is warning those ASEAN leaders over in Asia and in Southeast Asia, and those ASEAN leaders that continue to compromise with Beijing. Because you see, these ASEAN leaders don't even take time also, like the Russian President Vladimir Putin or the President Xi of China, and they don't take time to look into Bible prophecy. And what they're doing, basically, they're simply compromising with Beijing, and that is going to come back to backfire. But I want to go to PowerPoint number 4. God has been warning not only civilization, that what's in the making and what is also shaping up, in which he spoke in part 1 and decree and made that proclamation. The Lord said, what you're beginning to see, that we're closer in inches away from seeing Revelation chapter 6 and the rider on that horse, but also we're even closer. And the Lord said, redemption at the door, redemption near at the door and at the threshold of the rapture. God is showing me the word threshold. We're at the threshold of the rapture, and the Lord removing the saints and believers out of here. That's why this title, Why BRICS Nations Will Collapse, because in this global trade war, and they are going to somewhat, I believe, have come out and say that they will counter Donald J. Trump's tariff, and it's going to be a back and forth thing, and that is going to cause what? The escalation. A global trade war that ushers in the one thing I've been saying. There are 4 things that must happen. First, there must be the collapse. The second thing that must happen is that the digital currency, the global digital currency, has to be fully implemented and in place. And then I said the third one, and that one basically removes the saints and the believers out of the earth. And that is when they sign on that 2-state solution. And I have spoken already from Joel chapter 3 verse 2, when they divide the land. And then the 4th step, as I just said, it's the rapture. So you got the global collapse. You got the global digital currency. You got the 2-state solution, and goodbye. The believers and the saints are going to be swept out of the earth. The Lord is going to sweep our feet out of the earth. We're going to go airborne and find ourselves at the judgment seat. Now, another thing that I want to talk about is PowerPoint number 5, the Arctic. And I want to flex a little bit here when it comes to the Arctic, because I have been saying since 2020 that the U.S. needed to pivot also and to focus on the Arctic, because the Russians have built something there, that is basically not built something that is in place and basically solid. Okay, the Russians have practically built something there in the Arctic that is not only on solid ground. And the U.S. need to quickly pivot to the Arctic. And the Lord shifted my eyes into the realm of the Spirit and showed me submarines, like he did in part one. Submarines below seawater and sea level. And what I said over and over, that the U.S. needs to, with the Baltic states, need, along with the U.S. and NATO and Western allies, need to pay attention closely to the Arctic, especially Iceland and what's down below seawater and sea level when it comes to those cables. I want to make that very clear. Now, it's not just the Arctic, but I have also said the South China Sea and the Indo-Pacific. Anything below sea level, seawater, you need to pay attention, because the one that gets to the bottom first, I have said, has the upper hand. And then you are going to realize what I've been saying when it comes to war in the dark. And I did a title, War in the Dark, part 1 and part 2. And you need to go to listen to those titles. But I want to make this very clear also. What also causes the BRICS to collapse? One of the things that I have said just recently in part 1 and even just mentioned in this part 2. And that is that there will be a war inside the BRICS. But these two, and when I'm talking about Beijing and Russia, in the two leaders, I'm going to simply say to you, there's going to be a collision and they're going to collide when it comes to Western Africa, the eastern part of Africa, also when it comes to the Arctic. And I want to make this very clear, that the only thing that President Xi has in mind and Vladimir Putin is to control what's out in the sea, below seawater, and also control the shipping lanes and the shipping ports. One concentrate on this front and the other one concentrate on that front. And if the U.S., with NATO and Western allies and nations around the world, don't take back your shipping ports and your shipping lanes, I have said over and over that the U.S. needed to be more aggressive when it comes to the Panama Canal. The U.S., that's another thing, that the U.S. need to quickly accelerate and take full control of the Panama Canal. Now, for PowerPoint number 6, the delay game. I've already talked a little bit about that. The Russians in China, okay? And God said to me, and I said this earlier at the beginning of this telecast, that as I was preparing my message at about 9:30 a.m. in the morning, the word of the Lord came to me. And the Lord said, code of conduct. Now let me send those Asean leaders a stern warning from God, that eventually there is a thing called a day and the day after. And you're going to feel the ripple effects of compromising. Because, you see, Beijing has been trying to promote this code of conduct, which basically is nothing but a bluff and a trap. And here are ASEAN leaders and Asian leaders. And there's certain leaders in Southeast Asia that are practically glued and compromising with Beijing and with President Xi. And that, the Lord just showed me one word. And every ASEAN leader needs to circle that word. God said, that's going to fail because you're compromising. I said that it's time to protect the sovereignty of your nation, the sovereignty of your country, the sovereignty of your people. And you, as a leader in Southeast Asia, need to protect your waters and protect the sovereignty of your country and your people, period, instead of compromising. Another thing that I want to talk about is deep seek. And I said below it to write concern. I'm concerned, so should the president be concerned when it comes to deep seek. Because look, I believe that someone in Southeast Asia, among those ASEAN nations, someone knew better, someone knew. But because they compromised, they went ahead and gave Beijing some information. And the U.S. needs to look into that more thoroughly and search out really the truth. Because I believe that this deep seek that China came out with, I believe there's something bigger and larger. And I'm going to tell you what the Lord said. Remember, the Lord said that he was going to send a stern warning to the Southeast Asia leaders and the ASEAN leader. the Lord said what? Failure, and that your compromising is going to fail you and come back to bite. It's about protecting your country, protecting your nation, in the sovereignty of your nation. And the Lord said to me the word looming. This is what's looming in the near future. And what's looming in the near future very soon, that if you're not careful, if you agree to that code of conduct and you continue to compromise with Beijing, you're going to find yourself in deep, deep trouble, not only in your nation, but God is sending a stern warning to the leaders in Southeast Asia. Cut out the compromising. It's time to protect the sovereignty of your nation and the sovereignty of your people. That's point blank, and that is what the Lord is saying. The Lord is putting not only ASEAN leader in Southeast Asia, in Asia Pacific, on notice that you need to stop compromising. Another thing, for PowerPoint number 9, I talked about already the Arctic in Iceland. And Iceland needs to beef up its security. All the Baltic states in the Baltic Sea, in the Black Sea, they need to beef up not only their security, they need to not only enclose their borders. I have said over and over that America needs to completely shut the borders. Remember that I have said back in 2020, and this, you see me scratching my head a little bit, this blew my mind away, because the Lord just said to me, America needs to write this one down and circle this one, because this one is for America especially, but for all nations. The Lord said back in 2020, the Lord said cyber attacks. In other words, why in the world will the Lord bring that up? Why God says cyber attack? Because the U.S. sometime, and majority of the time, the U.S. still thinks that diplomacy works in the 21st century. And I have said over and over that there's coming a shifting of alliance, and more than likely your closest ally to not only to the U.S., to NATO and Western ally is simply going to betray you. Remember, what's your next door neighbor doing? And you need to understand that there's going to come a moment where there's going to be a shifting of alliance, and the U.S. needs to be more alert. And those leaders, the Lord showed me these words, senators, those senators down in D.C., with not only with the Republicans and the Democrats, all together with Congress, with the House of Representatives, all need to come together. And we, the greatest country in the world, I'm so blessed, and not only blessed, but so proud to say that my country is the greatest country in the world, America. But America needs to not only come together and allow God to move you, not only to bring about unification, unify, so that we can become a united front in the time when we're facing so many enemies in our rivalry when it comes to Beijing and Russia and Iran and North Korea and so on. It's time that the U.S., not only the senators in Republicans and Democrats, and the whole country needs to come together and be what? In one accord, but united together in unity. Another thing that I want to talk about is that the nations that are under the Antichrist alignment, those are the nations that will have the upper hand. And so also what you're beginning to see, and you will see, is the revived Roman Empire. But I want to begin to close with this. War in the dark. You need to go listen to part 1, part 2. There is no longer dark days. And I have said at the beginning of this telecast that the Abraham Accord, that one is the one. That's the trump card. If you ever going to listen to this telecast or listen to this title or share with your friends, that is the major trump card, the Abraham Accord, because Trump is highly favored in the Middle East. There is not a single politician in the 21st century that has got more favor or highly favored in the Middle East, nations practically around the world. He's very popular in other nations as well, and especially very popular inside America. But it's time for America to show its resiliency. It's time for America not only to display its resiliency, but also demonstrate its might, military power and might, and start to flex its muscle. Because the only thing that you see is that the Russians are playing a bluff game. They're tapping the president along with Beijing, with North Korea and Iran. And all this negotiating and this talk, it's a waste of time. They're trying to see how they can totally destroy our country. And here you are trying to promote diplomacy when the grace of God has been saying, not only over and over, that America needs to understand this one thing that he just said, that these are simply alarming moments, and that America needs to be, this one word, alert. America needs to understand that these are alarming moments, and America needs to understand what the Lord just said, that we need as a nation to be more alert, watchful, and prepared, and to shut down the borders and to get ready in case World War III breaks out, or in case any nation or any enemy that's not only our arch enemy and our arch rival, the grace of God is saying we want to be what the Lord said just now. America needs to be vigilant. Look what the Lord said. America needs to understand we're living in an alarming moment. Then the Lord said alert. Then the Lord said what to America? America and Americans with our government. We need to protect the sovereignty on our nation. And the Lord said what? What did the Lord say? You need to go and listen to this telecast and understand that the Lord said what? Vigilant. We need to be vigilant and watchful and pay attention, not only to what's going on here and protect our borders, but what's going around the world, especially when it comes to the Arctic, the Indo-Pacific, and especially the South China Sea in the Black Sea. I'm going to close with this. Look, I have nothing but great respect for our president, but I want our president to understand one thing, that he needs to begin to sit and really listen when it comes to Bible prophecy and when it comes to prophets, especially prophets. Look, God's not going to reveal anything to evangelicals. And I have said that there are evangelical in the president's circle, and they come down and they pray at the White House and all this, but they have no clue. They go on and say and talk about time and season. And they say that they know the time and season, but actually, look, when it comes to time and season, or to God's divine revelation and God's prophecy and God revealing what's happening, and not only in this time of acceleration and global sequence and the sequence of 96 hours and the prelude of the title first of 2025, where the Lord said accelerate, and what sequence? What you're going to see is that things are going to rapidly shape up, rapidly take place, and what you're going to see is that you're going to see World War III in the making, but it's going to come to fruition. But also, I have said that recently I did a telecast, and going back to 2020, I said that you need to understand that the Dome of Rock will turn into a turbulence, not only turmoil and chaos and confusion. And you got Revelation chapter 12, verse 3, Jerusalem turned into a trembling cup. So I want to begin to close with this, and that is that God's forecast is very simple when it comes to not only why the BRICS nations will collapse, because they are practically in a place where they made up their mind that they're going to challenge the West, and they're going to challenge U.S. power. Not only U.S. power, but U.S. military might. And I got news for the BRICS. I have said over and over, and I did a telecast, that I said that America will still remain as a top superpower nation in the world, number one, and will continue, because I want to make this very clear. Make this very clear that the U.S. dominates in the 21st century. Now I'm going to begin to close. I said that the Abraham Accord, the difference maker, was Donald J. Trump, and then I said, game changer, it's time to play a game called chess. And I said that God will score checkmate, and the Lord has got the final three moves, and God's going to bring not only the final mobilization, he's going to flex. And the grace of God said three things to America: alarming, alert, and vigilant. And America needs to start to flex along with NATO, Western allies, those nations over in the Baltic Sea, because Vladimir Putin, God said, and said for quite some time, he's just basically is God a stallion mentality. You see, God said that the war between the Russians and Ukraine, God said that that was a war and no special operation. And you see the Russians, they go back and forth. They keep waving back and forth. Oh, it's a special operation. The next minute they say it's a war. And I went on to say that the Black Sea would turn into a global war and more nations will get involved. Well, not only the leader of North Korea just sent 30,000 troops to fight alongside the Russians. And there is more. And then there is Beijing supplying Iran with drones, not only with drones, but also China supplying also the Russians. And I have said over and over, look, America needs to understand and wake up. There isn't any diplomacy in the 21st century. But I did say in part one that I will do a part two and talk about the drones. But I felt I'm going to hold on for a second and I'm going to speak concerning last year, those drones that we saw here inside America, up in the air and in the skies. I'm going to talk and I'm going to expose what the Lord has revealed or the Lord has shown me. And I want you to understand, get ready, because what they told us, it's not the truth when they talked about those drones. And I will explain. Now, God said at 9:30 a.m., code of conduct, and God was speaking basically concerning the South China Sea and Beijing. And what I want to say for the final time, and I don't want to keep repeating, America's leaders, I'm talking about what the Lord showed me. Remember the word senators and Republican in Congress need to come together, and the nation together needs to gather together and honor our founding fathers that came under that Judean faith, promoted not only this Judean faith in which America stands on that, all right, on the biblical foundation, what our founding fathers taught us and put in place. And we must together as a nation come collectively together, put our differences to the side. We can deeply disagree. It's time for America to realize that if we're not careful, what you're going to see is there's going to be inside America crisis. There's going to be the coming civil war. There is going to be a civil war if America and those down in D.C. don't wake up and say to each other, let's work together for the common good. Let's work together not only for the common good, but for the sovereignty of our nation that was founded under Judean faith. And we need to stand strong with the nation of Israel. Stand together with Israel. And not only stand together with Israel, but remember, I said it's just a delay game. And in this part two, God kept not only over and over putting civilization on notice, because he showed the word departure, and he's basically has been saying that this is what he said to me and showed me the word fragile. Because PowerPoint number 3 to one of my points, which I didn't give you in this part 2, is that the Lord said that Americans in civilization, in the whole world, and all of humanity is basically in the bubble, not only fragile, but at the point of no return. And so is the church, deeply divided. You see a mess inside the church. You see what they start to put, not only on their thumbnail, then they put this and they put that. But actually, God has never spoken to these false self-appointed apostles and prophets and men that have creeped up into the church and have become full-time pastors. And you see what they are promoting and what agenda, what topic and subject they're teaching. And they're basically teaching and preaching 3-point sermons, not only sugar-coated, but in this telecast and on Catch and Go and in Diamonds of Glory Ministry, all we do is simply flex. We get the word of the Lord. We hear from the voice of God. He speaks. And I have said over and over that when God speaks, he releases to us the very thing that comes from his spirit and the very thing that comes from his breath. And if you go and do your homework, and there's a track record that everything that we have spoken since the existing of Diamonds of Glory Ministry and going back to my early 90s, everything that we have spoken basically has been fulfilled and has come to pass. And you get ready because you're going to see that eventually what you got in the making is more whistleblower. More whistleblower when it comes to certain things. And I want to make this very clear, and I'm going to close. The Lord did say, Revelation 6, we're closer to that rider and inches away and maybe a few years away from seeing 1/3 of mankind being wiped out. And the Lord showed me in this part 2, and He's been showing this for quite some time. The Lord has been saying a major earthquake. I leave it right here in this telecast as the grace of God is reminding me over that the biggest difference in the Trump card is Donald J. Trump, game changer, and the Lord is saying America needs to flex its military power when it comes to the Panama Canal, the Arctic, the Indo, Asia Pacific, and if we all do that and come on board in a spirit of unity, unify and allow the Holy Spirit to unify as a nation, founded on our Judean faith, we will rise and dominate in the 21st century. May the Lord so richly bless you. Remember to click like, share, subscribe, hit on the bell to receive our latest telecast. And I catch you on my next telecast of Catch and Go. God bless.